Hello again. Time for another look at the papers with the broadcaster Gemma Forte and the journalist Janelle Aldred. Janelle, hello again. Let's start with Boris Johnson. Obviously, we just heard from him at the top of the hour. He was speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby. He seemed very confident, but most of the papers today, Gemma, let's bring up the Mirror, the front of the Mirror there, most of them echoing this sentiment: go now.
Yeah, the Mirror is sort of screaming into the abyss, though he's not going to go now. That is quite clear. The thing is, with everything that our sort of unwritten constitution, if you like, relies on, everything relies on integrity. So this idea that, and Johnson has proved that. So with regard to ignoring the ministerial code, for instance, as he did with Priti Patel, and I know it hasn't been clarified yet whether he had ministerial code, but the fact that his ethics advisor has quit, etc., etc. So another type of character would have resigned how many scandals ago? A long time ago. So he's here to stay unless his party do something about it. He just won that confidence vote, which I think has tarnished so many of them now, and post these by-elections, which sent such a clear message from two different types of constituency, all united in their disgust by the lies and by the constant sort of flow of lying and rule breaking. And yet here he is. So I think that the problem that the Conservatives face, everybody's saying, is there is no clear leader. There isn't anybody who seems to be muscling to the front right now, because this would be the point where you'd think they would be declaring themselves up for the challenge, and they're not. And perhaps that's why, partly because they don't want to take on the mantle of what lies ahead, which is looking pretty gloomy.
Okay, well, let's look at the Mail, page 10, because it's also interesting. We spoke to John Healey as well from Labour, and the Mail saying that Labour's not on track to win an outright majority at the next election following their victory in Wakefield, or at least that's what Sir Keir Starmer has been warned last night, Janelle.
Yeah, and we might say this paper has a bit of a bias against the left, so we'll consider that. But it seems that what they're saying is that this vote for Labour was more about a dislike of the Tories than it was a warming to Labour and their policies. And I do think that Labour have quite the uphill task ahead of them if they do want to win the next general election outright. It's not looking like they're going to do that at the moment. And I think partly another part of the reason why Boris Johnson is still in place is because there isn't an immediately strong opposition that is forcing them and kind of forcing the Tories' hands to say, you need a new leader or else you'll definitely lose. And so I think all of these things have come into play about why Boris is still in place. And I think, whether you like Labour or whether you think, every government needs a really strong opposition to counter the things that they're doing and to bring that challenge to what they're doing and what they're saying. But I think for Labour at the moment, and for Keir Starmer, he's just not quite cutting through. It should be a clear thing right now that Labour are surging ahead in the polls, and that is not happening. So I think that Labour definitely have some work to do around Keir, around his messaging, around his comms, around his strategy, and also around his policy. We just need some real clarity. I feel like I'm still not quite sure what his policies are. They're just not Conservative.
Yeah, a lot of people arguing that. Gemma, let's talk about strikes. Obviously, day 3 of the rail strikes. But The Guardian, what are they saying? Are we possibly looking at NHS strikes as well?
We could be. And we could also be looking at teachers striking. I think across the board, these people who we all clapped for during the pandemic have reached a point where they can't sustain working for the wages that they are being offered. And in a nurse's case, getting a 3% pay rise amounts to a £1,400 pay cut due to inflation, which is at 9%. It's going, they're forecasting it could go as high as 11% potentially. You've got nurses using food banks. This is fundamentally wrong. Now, of course, for any medic, it absolutely is counterintuitive to the very heart of what they do to strike. But if this is a last resort, despite the fact that it would mean who knows what, and it's really frightening to even contemplate it. The rail strikes cause upheaval, they cause chaos, perhaps people don't get to operations, but our health providers striking is another prospect altogether. But I get it. retention within the NHS. People are leaving in droves. And this idea that there isn't any money is a fallacy. Brexit has cost the country billions. We've lived through austerity. 37 billion was spent on test and trace. So there's been bad management of the economy. And then people aren't stupid. They're looking above. They're getting rid of this rule where bankers' bonuses used to be capped, not anymore. So there has to be a redistribution of wealth. And this isn't mad socialist thinking. This is just redoing capitalism. It's not working. Ordinary people can't afford to live.
Janelle, were you affected by the rail strikes? Because the Daily Mail, page 4, they're saying that actually strikes just aren't as effective as they used to be because we're all #WFH, work from home.
I mean, it's a bit of an early victory lap for Grant Shapps, in my opinion, on this subject. I was affected by the rail strikes. There was some work that I had to do, some talks I was giving, which would have been better in person, but, we were restricted to Zoom, and we've been locked down in a kind of lockdown working from home protocol for a long time. So whilst we can slip back into it, just because it's not as chaotic as it would have been if we didn't have that, doesn't mean it's not massively disruptive, and doesn't mean that people aren't massively resentful of the fact that we are now kind of back at home. And the other thing that I think is clear is that there's no resolution at the moment. So that means that there will be more strikes, and as Gemma said, compounded by teachers, by doctors, airline workers striking. We are really about to have a massive summer of discontent, and it's not about how chaotic and people being able to work from home. It's about the massive disruption, whole scale, to people's whole entire lives and livelihoods. And think a lot of people striking about pay.
I'm going to have to jump in there. On that happy note, I'm going to have to say bye. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic weekend. Thanks to you both.
Bye.
Lots more still to come here on Sky News Breakfast, including Beth's interview with the Prime Minister from Rwanda.